Hey guys, welcome to the Perfectly Wasted Podcast. I'm the host, DullOxide. Today's episode 25 on Standard versus Gaming Peripherals. You can find all my previous episodes on the Drinking Wisemen YouTube, as well as my bi-weekly podcast, Brew the Truth, all my day-to-day photos, cosplay photos on my Instagram at DullOxide. So, gaming peripherals. I know that there are a lot of people out there that wonder, what's the difference between like the standard stock mouse and keyboard and headphones that I might get with my system and what gamers use. And the truth of the matter is that there's not really too much different. Now, I know I'm going to catch a lot of shit for that, but in all reality, they're all input devices and output devices, and they all work similarly in fashion. If you go out to any store and buy any mouse, it's going to be able to give you a certain amount of feedback from it that you're going to be able to have your computer register and your character will move. And that's the truth of the matter, is that all these devices actually are just to boost the effectiveness of play. The reason that I want to talk about this a little is because Razer has just recently released information that they're trying to come out with a wireless mouse that's supposed to be good enough for esports. Now, the reason most people don't believe that wireless could be used for esports is because, generally speaking, a wireless device has to be able to broadcast out and be picked up by a receiver, and that receiver usually has a couple of milliseconds of delay. And this is the same kind of issue that you saw when people were playing on the GameCube and they were using the Wavebird controllers. They were seeing slight delays inside of the Smash Brother play, which is why most people use wired controllers for professional play instead of a Wavebird. And the truth of the matter is that that delay does exist. So Razer seems to have found some way to reduce this delay to make it so that it's less noticeable or even non-existent. So recently there's kind of been a big push on the different peripherals that you can get for your computer to enhance your gaming capabilities, and most of that push is kind of towards the peripherals that I've got shown here. So you got the mouse, the keyboard, and headphones. So mice and keyboards are probably the peripherals that people will suggest to switch out if you're trying to increase your gaming performance. So I feel like that there's this big misunderstanding that if you all of a sudden get a bunch of gaming peripherals, your performance is going to be increased exponentially. And the truth of the matter is that that's not actually true. All right. So let's say that you've been working with your stock keyboard, mouse, and headphones that you got when you initially bought your system, and they're not gaming peripherals at all. They're just the standard equipment. Well, whatever you're used to is probably going to be whatever you're going to be best with. So if you start gaming with, a mechanical keyboard and a mouse that has 12,000 DPI and whatnot, then sure, you might be better with that than you're going to be with standard equipment, because that's can be considered gaming peripherals. But if you were someone that started gaming or started using a computer on regular peripherals, then it's going to take you a little bit of time to get acclimated to these types of gaming peripherals. So that being said, I think a lot of people kind of wonder, what's the big difference? So the big difference is that on a gaming mouse, your dot per inch, which is your DPI, is going to be much, much higher. Now, alright, so how much higher? I feel like most standard peripherals only go to about 4,000 DPI, and gaming peripherals can go upwards of 12,000. And I think that most people don't even use that high for their gaming peripherals, because 12,000 DPI makes it so that as soon as you move your mouse, even 1/16 of an inch, you could be 360 at that point if your DPI is set all the way up, skyrocketed. Probably the biggest difference is that gaming mice have different buttons on the side, so that you don't just have one back button. You have 4 or 5 buttons that you could use for macros or that you can use to control different things. So I, for instance, use mine just to do speech, essentially, and to be able to do a punch real quick instead of having to hit a punch key. You could use it for crouching, a bunch of other different things that standard mice don't have. So that definitely is a benefit, but it's also something that you have to learn. Now, with keyboards, it's a little bit different. So with gaming keyboards, you have a little bit of room to grow, which is to say that there's a bunch of different key types that you can use, and people will always talk about, what kind of cherries are you using and things like this. These kind of things don't really matter. All right, now, I know people are also going to argue, yes, they do matter. You don't know what you're talking about. But the reality is that whatever you're comfortable with is going to be what you're going to be the best with, and that's the same with pretty much everything. It's not actually exclusive to gaming. So you're going to have the three major types of keyboards that are out there that people are going to use, and that's going to be linear, tactile, and clicky keys as far as mechanical keyboards go. All right. So certain people are going to like to hear what's coming out of their keyboard more than they're going to like to feel what's coming out of their keyboard. Certain people are going to like to feel what's coming out of their keyboard more than they like to hear what's coming out of their keyboard. And certain people are going to like to not have either, basically. All right? Essentially, the biggest difference on a gaming keyboard compared to like a standard keyboard is the rollover that you have. And all right, so like maybe you know nothing about gaming keyboards. So what's rollover mean? So what rollover is it's kind of like the memory that the keyboard has to remember the keys that have been pressed in succession. All right, so let's say that I'm trying to spell out standard, and I hold down the S key and then I type out the rest of standard and I release the S key. A standard keyboard might only be able to pick up 2 or 3 of the keys that were pressed after the S. Whereas a mechanical keyboard, depending on the brand and depending on how far the rollover goes, will be able to pick up all of the characters that have been input after the S key. So you'll be able to spell out the entire thing. Now, you're kind of wondering, well, why is that important? The reason that that's important is because the amount of keys that you have pressed at any given time on a standard keyboard will be able to be relayed to your character in game. So if you're holding down 2 keys to strafe, and you have to hold down a 3rd key or a 4th key or a 5th key to be able to talk or use an item, at that point, that's where a standard keyboard is going to start failing you. And a mechanical keyboard is going to be able to give you the advantage because you're going to have key presses that you won't be able to have on a standard keyboard. So really, that's the real benefit of having a gaming peripheral over a standard peripheral, is that once you're to the level that you're going to be able to use multiple keys inside of a game at the same time, it's going to benefit you greatly to have a gaming keyboard because your standard keyboard is just not going to be able to give you the response you're looking for. Now, people also say that sound doesn't really matter so much inside of games, but if you're really into first-person shooters and things like this, having 7.1 headphones like the ones that I have here are really going to be beneficial to you, because with 7.1 headphones, you're going to be able to hear all of the angles around you as long as the game is able to output those sounds in a way that you're going to be able to hear them. So it can be quite beneficial to you because you're going to be able to kind of have an idea if someone's coming up to like your rear right or your rear left. You'll be able to hear it quite literally, and that kind of gives you a little bit of an advantage. Now, how much of a difference? It really just kind of depends on the person. So you being able to differentiate the sound as far as like if it's rear right or rear left or, center is going to be based on you. If you just have standard right and left stereo headphones, you're still going to hear those sounds, but it's going to be meshed in with everything else that you hear out of those right and left channels. So you might be able to see some increase, but at the same time, it's not a necessity to have, all right? And lastly, one that I don't have pictured here is that there's like kind of a really big push for people to have very clear audio as far as their microphone goes. Now, obviously, I have like a semi-production quality microphone, so my sound sounds relatively clear. Way better than what you're going to hear on most gaming headsets or with using just like a standard microphone that goes through USB. The speech that you hear is going to be much clearer and crisper. And that's a benefit if you're trying to do TeamSpeak, but since most people don't give a fuck about TeamSpeak, it really doesn't matter too much. So overall, I want to say that you could probably start out gaming and even game semi-professional with standard equipment, but as soon as you start getting to the point that your key presses inside of your game are going to go past your standard equipment, that's when you're going to start looking for something better. And I know that specifically with mice, people start to get a real hard-on for DPI, but the reality is that most standard mice are going to have a high enough DPI that's going to be able to perform inside of your game, and even then, if they don't, the in-game settings are going to allow you to compensate. So really, whatever you're most comfortable with is going to be what's best for you. So that's basically kind of what I want to touch base on gaming peripherals. I think that my final say is not really necessary, but if you plan on going pro, you have to get used to it. And that being said, I want to thank you all for watching this long. Please do like, subscribe, and share these videos. And that was, again, 10 minutes perfectly wasted.